Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're reviewing the new mixtape from Logic, Bobby Tarantino 2. Bobby Tarantino 2 is a follow-up to last year's Everybody, as well as the first Bobby Tarantino mixtape that was released in 2016. And when it comes to those two projects from Logic, while I do consider myself a fan of Logic, I like his material overall, I would say. Those two projects didn't exactly sit with me all too well for different reasons, really. In fact, quite the opposite reasons. Everybody just felt a bit too cluttered with just the massive concept to try to take on, but didn't exactly pull off all too well. Whereas the first Bobby Tarantino mixtape really just lacked substance, I feel, in terms of, lyrics, and overall the more trap-oriented production isn't something that I really care for, just given that I'm not a big fan of trap music in general. So I really didn't care for either of those two projects all too much for those reasons, and coming into this project I was a bit concerned that I was going to get one of those two problems reoccurring again, particularly the one in the case of the first Bobby Tarantino mixtape, given that this is a follow-up to that. And in many ways, it does kind of follow up with those the same style as that mixtape and some of the similar problems that I had with the original mixtape. This project once again shows Logic going for a more trap-oriented sound overall. It's not exactly, music that's supposed to really have a concept to it like Everybody did. It's quite the opposite of that. And in many ways, that helps and hurts the music to some degree, at least when you compare it to an album like Everybody and the problems that I had with that. On one regard, I do really like Logic's rapping throughout most of this project. I think he's a good rapper overall, and I think he really showcases that here on this project. And just looking at some of my favorite songs on this project, they're really the ones that showcase his rapping ability the best. Like the track 44 More, which was the first single from this thing, which I think is a decent song overall. I think it is, I feel like it would have been better if it had been placed earlier in the track listing instead of as the last track, because after so many tracks of, similar subject matter, similar just styles of music, getting to this track, it doesn't quite feel as good at the end as it maybe would have felt being the first track or something like that. It doesn't really have the same appeal as I did when I was listening to it as a single originally, but I still think it is one of the better tracks on here. The track Warm It Up, which sees the return of Logic's Young Sinatra persona, is another one on here that I really liked. I felt like his rapping on that was probably the best on the entire mixtape, and for that reason I found myself gravitating towards that track more than some of the other ones here in the track listing. I thought overall it was a pretty good song. And unfortunately, while I do like those two tracks, I can't really say that much of the rest of the track listing really stands out to me all that much. Much of these tracks follow a very similar style, very similar format. Really, they're just Logic kind of, rapping well, might I add, for the most part, about really not much of anything. Most of these songs really don't have, a message or any greater concept to them. They're just kind of, he's just kind of going at it, really. Much of the lyrics are kind of in one ear, out the other when I'm listening to this thing, just because they're not particularly memorable or interesting for the most part. There are some interesting lines here or there, interesting puns, things of that sort, but, they're not quite interesting enough to really, hook my interest all that much. Like I said, for the most part, it's in one ear, out the other in terms of the lyrics on this thing. And for the most part, they're just not very memorable throughout the project overall. The production, I would say, for the most part, is pretty good on this project. Most of the production complements Logic's voice and flow very nicely. And overall, while I wouldn't say it's the greatest production ever or anything quite like that, it gets the job done for most of these tracks. The only track on this project where I think the production isn't good at all is the track Everyday, where it's produced by Marshmello, who I wasn't really familiar with prior to this mixtape at all, but I guess he's some producer who's, I guess, popular now. I don't know really much about him, but I really did not like his production on this track at all. It just sounds very cheap. The synths in particular just sound really cheap, very plasticky on this track, and it doesn't really help that Logic sounds a bit annoying on this track as well, especially with the hook on the song. It was easily my least favorite song on the entire project, mostly for the production on it. It just did not sound very good, and it sounds very out of place compared to the production on the other tracks as well. I guess considering that, it's a collaboration, it was trying to get, maybe some radio play or something like that, but overall I just felt like it was not a good song at all in my opinion. Now, I know some people have compared Logic to Travis Scott on tracks like Wizard of Oz and Boom Trap Protocol on this thing, and I do definitely see some of those similarities. which it wasn't exactly something that I really cared for all that much. And I'm not going to talk about this too much just because I feel like lots of people have already exhausted the topic by this point, but yeah, I wasn't exactly a big fan of that. And as far as how a lot of the other guest features on this project go, outside of the ones I've already spoken about, they were just kind of average overall in my opinion. The only one that I felt like was kind of decent was 2 Chainz' feature, and I'm not really a fan of his at all, but still I felt like his was, alright in my opinion. The others were just kind of forgettable, like much of the rest of the rapping on this project. Another kind of strange or interesting thing about this project is that the first track and the skit that it opens with is like a Rick and Morty skit. Like, it's actually an official like Rick and Morty skit. It's not like just him like pretending to be Rick and Morty or something. Like, it's legit Rick and Morty. It's a little bit strange. Like, it's them in the spaceship like gonna listen to Logic, so it's like listening of the rest of this mixtape like from the perspective of Rick and Morty. Is this Rick and Morty season 4 that I'm listening to right here? Is this Rick and Morty season 4? I felt like it was a little bit strange. I know Logic was featured on an episode of Rick and Morty in their last season. He made like a brief appearance, if I'm remembering it correctly. But yeah, I felt that it was kind of a strange way to open the project. But I guess some people might enjoy it. I mean, I do like Rick and Morty, but I still felt like it was a bit of a strange way to open the project to some degree. But overall, this project, I mean, there's not really all too much asides from what I've already mentioned to really say about it. Much of the tracks on this thing feel very similar, very samey throughout. Like I said, Logic, while he is rapping pretty well throughout most of this project, I can't really complain about his rapping skills, which has always been one of the strong points in Logic projects. But I just don't really feel like on this project he's saying much of anything. I know some people are going to say that's the point. I mean, it's even acknowledged in the skit that opens up this project that, album Logic is more for messages and things like that, whereas mixtape Logic is just, him kind of having fun, I guess you could say. But still, it didn't really stick with me all too much, even the more fun stuff here. I don't think that just because it lacks a message doesn't mean that the lyrics have to be really filler-like, I guess you could say. Because like I said, much of these lyrics are in one ear, out the other when I'm listening to it. It's more so for the beat, more so for the flow. Those kind of things stuck with me a lot more going through this project than any of the lyrics that Logic was really talking about here. So, if you're someone who, if you are a Logic fan, if you're a diehard Logic fan, you're probably going to like this project to some degree, and you probably are already aware that this isn't going to be the most lyrical project in the world. However, if you're looking for, something that's kind of lyrical, has a bit more of a message to it, or is just a lot more like interesting in a fun way, I guess you could say, this isn't exactly a project that's going to excite you all too much. Overall, it didn't exactly improve on the first Bobby Tarantino mixtape, which I didn't really care for either, like I mentioned before. It just kind of is much of the same, in my opinion. So if you like that mixtape, you're probably going to like this one too, to some degree. But if you didn't, like me, you're not going to like this mixtape all that much. So yeah, overall, I'd have to say this project, I'd recommend it only to, hardcore Logic fans, really. Because outside of that group, I don't think there's going to be much to take from this project overall. But yeah, that's just my own opinion. Feel free to have your own, and feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews and things of that sort. Thank you for watching, guys, and stay golden.